Hey, everybody, welcome to Chapel Sunday School, our second week of the book of Revelation. And today we're just going to get through chapter 1, verse 9 to 15. And so this is an exciting journey, an in-depth study. It'll probably take us a good long while to go through this entire book, but I hope you join with us, and I'll keep putting out these videos each week. This first slide looks a little wonky because I just took a picture of it rather than retype all this. Just another, let you know the overview of the book of Revelation. The book of Revelation does not flow sequentially. One chapter does not necessarily follow the previous. Some chapters happen concurrently. The seals, trumpets, bowls, and judgments happen at the same time in a very short period of time, over a 10-day period, once the seals are opened and the heavenly scroll is revealed. And that 10-day period is called the Days of Awe. And that historically happens between three fall feasts. And the first is the Feast of Trumpets. It's the first day of the seventh month. Um, and so it's called Yom Teruah, or Feast of Trumpets. 10 days later is the Day of Atonement. And historically, the belief was that, well, you called the 10 days of awe between trumpets and Yom Kippur because the Day of Atonement, it's a judgment day, and even went so far as some of the Jews believed that this is when God decided who was going to live and die in the next year. And so they used those 10 days of deep introspection and self-examination, considering their relationship to the Father. And then after that comes on the 15th day is the Feast of Tabernacles, or Sukkot. And it tells of how his chosen are taken on wings of an eagle to the wilderness, where Yahushua spread his tabernacle over us in protection during this 10-day period of tribulation. But the book of Revelation is not a 7-year period as taught in Christian circles. There's no 7-year period in the book of Revelation. We get our 7-year tribulation from Daniel's 70th week of years, 7 years. And but the actual calling it a 7-year tribulation period is not in the book of Revelation, but it is believed that there will be a 7-year period, time of deep tribulation that will occur amongst the many things that take place in the book of Revelation. But here's how it's laid out. Chapter 1 is just his commissioning and revelation from Gabriel of the meaning behind the heavenly scroll that he saw in this vision that he encountered. Chapters 2 and 3, it's all the letters to the churches, warning, Yahushua's warning to all of us to endure in the faith and not compromise, giving specific examples with these 7 assemblies or 7 churches. Chapter 4 is describing the Enoch zodiac, called the heavenly scroll, with the throne in heaven in the middle to establish the source of the revelation. Chapter 5, all of chapter 5 occurs and is showing us what takes place after the 7th trumpet sounds. In chapter 6 is the first 4 seals. They occur over the age of Pisces and can be proven in historical accounts dating back 2,000 years. The age of Pisces is the age of tribulation. Now, this is interesting. And last week we had this verse 7. Behold, he comes with clouds, and every eye shall see him, and they also which pierce him. There are a number of references to the Messiah coming in the clouds or on the clouds. And in the book of Revelation, John was shown the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven and described what he saw written in the heavenly scroll. This is what is interesting. The Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven is an idiomatic phrase. It's an idiom. When you think about talking to the class today about, we try to read and interpret the Bible as literally as we possibly can. There are some things that are symbolic, and there are some definite idiomatic phrases, such as an eye for an eye and a tooth for tooth. Nowhere does God ordain bodily mutilation, gouging out somebody's eye if he caused the damage. It's the punishment should fit the crime. And the idiomatic phrase is eye for an eye, tooth for tooth. Another idiomatic phrase where Jesus said, he that dippeth his hand in the dish with me is the one that will betray me. Well, that's an idiomatic phrase for it's somebody at this table. We use idiomatic phrases a lot. Um, you know, if you talk about let's break bread together, well, we're not literally going to break bread. We're going to go to McDonald's or something. It's an idiomatic phrase for let's eat. So this, if you can think of the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven as an idiom, because got to thinking about this, if literally, all the artist renderings of the second coming, Jesus is coming in the clouds or on the clouds. Well, what if it's a cloudless day that day? He's just got to make sure there are clouds out there. The heavenly scroll uh, is Orion representing the Son of Man in the heavenly scroll. See, these are biblical astronomy. It's called the Mazzaroth, and the stars. This is not astrology. It is astronomy, biblical astronomy. The sun, moon, and stars were created for signs and seasons. The wise men came from the east following a star. That was an astronomical thing that led them to Bethlehem. So Orion, it's the constellation of the Archer, but it represents the Son of Man, and the clouds of heaven is seen as the Milky Way galaxy. Now that changes things a little bit to say he's coming, and he's coming from above. He's coming from the heavens. That's literal, but exactly, will it be puffy white things in the sky? That's up to interpretation. The scroll speaks of Yahusha, who is represented by Orion, coming in the clouds of heaven. We see John begin reading the heavenly scroll. Now, Orion is mentioned several times in Scripture. The prophet Amos was guided by the heavenly scroll, and what's called the Pleiades or Pleiades. It's the brightest constellation in the heavens. It's actually made up, we know now, it's made up of thousands of stars, but the 7 brightest stars that were visible from Earth were called Pleiades, and there were 7 of them. Amos 5:8, Yahuwah, who made the Pleiades, and Orion, the Son of Man. It's the stars, the Son of Man, the 7 stars end up symbolizing the 7 churches in Revelation. And the Messiah is holding these 7 stars in his hand, and John is instructed to write letters to each of these 7 churches. Job speaks of Yahuwah as the maker of the bear, another constellation, and Orion and Pleiades and the constellations of the south. So they were aware of the constellations. It's just amazing that how much they interpreted and understood. Who was the first guy that ever connected the dots and made stars into stick figures and called them bears and lions and archers and those kinds of things, just like this. This is a picture of the constellation Orion. It's also known as the Archer. There's Orion's belt. Here's the bow. And if you want to find where Pleiades is, like this says, draw a line using the 3 stars in Orion's belt, follow it upward past his bow, upward, and look past Aldebaran, and then you come to the Pleiades, 7 bright stars. What's interesting here is later on we'll see in Revelation 14, and I looked in the heavens, and behold, a white cloud, and upon the cloud, this is speaking of the Milky Way, one sat like unto the Son of Man, Orion, having on his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sword. So here's that constellation. Here it is depicted, it's the archer, called the archer in mythology, but here's depicted as his arm up there is wielding a sword, and this is a shield, and it's Orion, but it represents the Son of Man, Jesus, in the cloud of the Milky Way. So here we are at verse 9. I, Yochanan, and again, there's no J in Hebrew, so it's John, but it's in Hebrew, it's Yochanan. I, John, who also am your brother and companion in tribulation and in the kingdom and patience of Yahushua HaMashiach, Jesus the Messiah, was in the isle that is called Patmos for the word of Elohim and the testimony of Yahushua HaMashiach. Now, we've all heard of Patmos. We know that is where the Apostle John was exiled by Roman authorities. Why? Because he was proclaiming the gospel. This exile occurred during the reign of Emperor Domitian, AD 81 to 96, a time when Roman authorities actively suppressed religious movements perceived as subversive. And someone was telling me today after class, so they were watching a documentary, how the Romans, in all their severe persecution of those preaching the gospel, all they did was help spread it, because as people were escaping what we know as the Holy Land, up into places like Turkey, where these 7 churches are, and Greece, Macedonia, and parts beyond, they were taking the gospel with them, and so the gospel spread. Thanks to the, they say the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. But John was willing to be exiled because he knew what he knew. It's amazing. It's such a validation of the validity of our faith, because all these people, all the hundreds of thousands of martyrs, and particularly these early apostles, people don't die for a thought or a doctrine or a preference or just some belief of which there's no substance, but they saw the risen Savior. They saw that he was crucified. They saw him. They knew. They were all willing to die a martyr's death, which they all did, except for John was exiled, and he died in old age. The island's isolation. This was kind of like the Alcatraz of the day. And here's a picture of it. There's in the bottom right is Patmos. Here are the 7 churches in Turkey, off in Smyrna and Ephesus, right on the coast of the Aegean Sea. And so they made Patmos like an Alcatraz because it limited easy escape, and it allowed the Roman overseers to maintain control over these prisoners. So if you were exiled to Patmos, it was you were deemed, we don't want you anywhere around society. And most people that went there, I'm sure they died there. And here's another pinpoint of that, how you can see connection with the entire Mediterranean Sea, the 7 churches, Holy Land over here. There's the island of Crete. Patmos means, by the way, barren and rocky, which is very fitting for that barren, rocky island that became a prison place. It's just unimaginable. There's, there's no electricity, no food, no lights, no motor cars. Gilligan's Island. They were, I'm sure they didn't try to provide the best of food and meals and care for the prisoners living in who knows what kind of circumstances. Hygiene, sewage, showers, all the things that we think of that we provide for our prisoners, none of that was on the island of Patmos. I was in the Ruach on the day of Yahuwah. He was able to have something to write with, and parchment evidently, and was able to write a good bit of it. And he probably had some table to write on. And his, since there was little chance of escaping, they probably, I don't imagine that he spent time in chains in a dungeon, but the accommodations were not good. Just leave it at that. But he says, I was in the Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, the Spirit, on the day of Yahuwah. Now, I want to point out here, in the King James, in a lot of translations, it says, I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day. Now, the thing is, both of these words I've highlighted, they're the same word in Greek, and it's the word en. It's Strong's 1722. And just like in Hebrew, a single word can have a lot of meaning depending on the context of it. So this is a little subjective of why they translated this, I was in the Spirit rather than in the Lord's day. They said on the Lord's day. Smith's literal translation, I think, gets it right. I was in the Spirit in the day pertaining to the Lord. Now, what is that day? Many people want to believe that this literally means that John was in the Spirit on a Sunday, because we grew up saying, well, Sunday is the Lord's day. We don't go swimming on the Lord's day when I grew up. But that would, they believe that, adding credence to Sunday being now the Lord's day or the Sabbath. But see, the Sabbath is the seventh day of the week, not the first day of the week. I firmly believe John is saying that the experience he had of visions and instructions to write these things happened as he was somehow transported. It's not a dream he had, and it's something more than just a vision. It's very real to him, what he's being shown in the heavenly scroll by the angel Gabriel. But it's speaking of a future time that is the day of Yahweh, which is the same as all the other references to that day. In that day will be this and that. It's all references to the day of his return and judgment of this world. So I believe that the best way to understand this is that he was in the Spirit seeing the day of the Lord, which is his second coming, the judgment day, the trumpets, the Day of Atonement, Feast of Tabernacles. These all are in close proximity to each other in the day of the Lord. And then it says in this translation, I took this from the Eth Sefer, I use that because it uses a lot of Hebrew words. Even though this, we say, well, this is in Greek. Revelation was originally written in Hebrew, I believe, because John was Hebrew. He spoke Hebrew, wrote Hebrew. But it was going to these 7 churches in Turkey, so it was translated into Greek for the benefit of these churches. Now, did John do that translating? He was able to, obviously, to get these letters out from Patmos to these churches. Somebody else might have done the translating, or maybe perhaps John did. We know that Paul was this educated scholar. John was a fisherman. So don't know that he really knew how to read and write Greek all that well. He was much more in tune with Hebrew or possibly Aramaic. But this phrase right here, most of the English translations omit this, where it says, because we studied this last week, I'm the Aleph and the Tav, the first and last. And it's a picture of an ox head and a picture of a cross, really, the first and last letter. The Alpha and Omega don't look anything like that. But I believe that John is thinking Aleph and Tav for a reason, because in the picture language, you'll see in a minute, the Aleph is a picture of an ox head. The Tav being a picture, looks like a cross, and that was long before Romans had crucifixion on a cross, but it shows the strong one, the leader, the ox, nailed to the cross, putting them together. That's Yahusha. I am that Aleph. And like we said last week, what's so amazing is that there's thousands of Aleph Tavs together in the Hebrew in the Old Testament. And he is saying, I am that untranslatable word. And I'll show you that here in just a second. So, but the ESV just simply says, it skips that and just goes right to the part, say, write in a book, send it to these 7 churches. And that's what is written here. And there's the 7 churches. And Gabriel tells John to write a book of everything he will see and send a copy to each of these 7 called out assemblies. I'd rather call them assemblies. The Greek word is ecclesia, and that gets translated as church, but it's just the word that means also assembly. In Hebrew, it would be a kahal, which just means assembly, God's assembly, in what is now known as Turkey, is where these 7 churches are. By the way, John does not name in Revelation that this angelic being is Gabriel. We don't know that it's Gabriel. We're surmising that it is, primarily because the name Gabriel means mighty one. It's not necessary to make the connection to Gabriel, although there are certainly parallels in Revelation 10 to Daniel. Gabriel is mentioned twice in Daniel. Both times he delivers a message to Daniel from God. So Gabriel's the one we know he's mentioned as speaking all the revelations to Daniel, of which in the book of Revelation you got some references to Daniel. And Gabriel's also the one that appears twice in Luke in a similar role, announcing to Mary that she's pregnant. So it makes sense that Gabriel is this mighty one, archangel that's delivering this message. And I turned to see the voice that spoke with me, and being turned, I saw 7 golden menorah. Now, the Greek word for menorah is the Hebrew word. The Greek word is luknia, and it just simply is translated candlestick or lampstand. And so most Bibles just say, I saw 7 golden lampstands. But the Hebrew, there is menorah. And so, and he saw 7 of them. This artist depiction here just graphed out the book of Revelations, because there's lots of 7s. And of course, menorah is a 7 lampstand, and there are 7 groups of 7s that are throughout Revelation. The beginning with over here on the right, you read right to left, the letters to the 7 churches, the seals, the trumpets, the thunders, the bowls, the angelic proclamations, and the evil kingdoms of Revelation. And this is what a menorah looks like, of course. You're familiar with this. You've seen this. This has long since been an emblem for the Jewish people, is the menorah. This is what was in the tabernacle and in the temple. And it says in verse 13, John saw in the midst of the 7 menorah one like unto the Son of Man. Now, what's interesting here is in the midst of this menorah, the middle candle is called the Shamash candle, and that means servant candle. They light this one first, and the other candles get their light from the servant candle. And isn't that interesting that we get our light from the servant who came, the suffering servant from Jesus, Yahushua HaMashiach? And most artist depictions of what's going on in Revelation draw something like this. They just, of course, make 7 lampstands, but think of these maybe as 7 menorahs. And it says that he has the 7 stars, the Pleiades, in his right hand. And Daniel 7:13 says, I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven. There's that idiom. And came to the Ancient of Days, which would be a reference to Yahweh, and they brought him near before him. The book of Enoch also says, afterwards, their countenance says, shall be filled with darkness and confusion before the Son of Man. This phrase Son of Man, it appears Jesus called himself Son of Man many times. And it's often been just explained that Son of God refers to his deity, Son of Man refers to his humanity, but it's a little deeper than that. It is a very strong statement of Son of Man, capitalized Son of Humanity, that he came from above as the Son of Man. And so we're going to take a little detour right now to talk a little bit more about this menorah. You have to go back to Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, it takes 10 letters, or excuse me, 10 words to say in what is 7 words in Hebrew. It's no accident that it's 7 words, and there's 7 branches of the menorah. 7s keep showing up so much. Bereshit bara Elohim. And here's this Aleph Tav. When Jesus said, I'm the Aleph and the Tav. We hear it as Alpha and Omega. That's Greek what he said was, I'm the Aleph and Tav. And of course, in the Paleo Hebrew, Aleph is a picture of an ox head, means the strong one. And the Tav, it's a sign, but it actually looks like a cross. No coincidence there. So in the beginning, and the Aleph Tav, you can pronounce it as et. So I'd say Bereshit bara Elohim et hashemayim va'etz haaretz, and that's in the beginning created Elohim, God. And there's this non-translatable word, and it's an Aleph and a Tav. It's there to point to the object of the verb. It's just a grammatical thing. The Jews don't even know how it came about. But here's the noun. In the beginning, God created. He created, it's the verb, created what? He created the heavens. Well, he created more than that. So there's a va Aleph Tav. The vav generally means and. Va vietz, ba'etz, haaretz. Eretz is earth. Ha usually means the earth. But it's interesting that here's an Aleph Tav with a vav in front of it. Now the vav is the sixth letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Man was created on the sixth day, so the vav represents man. In Paleo Hebrew, it is a picture of a nail or a peg. It is a connector. It's a connector. So with the Aleph Tav, we see what the connector between heaven and earth is. The connector between Hashemayim and the earth, the heavens and the earth, is the Aleph Tav. Isn't it interesting how that worked out? And Aleph Tav represents Jesus, the Son of Man, the Son of God. Here's again is a menorah, 7-branch, and Jesus is the shamash candle, the center. He's the vine. We are the branches. And there are 7 of these candles in all in a menorah. 7 words in the first 7 words of our Bibles, and there is the Aleph Tav in paleo form. That's the original Hebrew. You see, it's a picture of an ox head, and it's a sign. It could be thought of. It looks like an X but it sure looks like a cross to you and me. He's the strong one nailed to the cross. So, Bereshit bara Elohim. There's et. And there's the modern Aleph Tav. Hashemayim, va'etz, and what? The earth. It's amazing. There's so many gems to find in Scripture. It reminds me of my favorite Bible verse, one of them. It's the glory of God to conceal a matter, the honor of kings to search it out. Proverbs 25:2. I'm going to leave you with this song. We had some discussion in class, and that's as far as we got. So there's a lot there. This is not a very long lesson on the video. It's about 30 minutes with this song. I've got just 2 minutes of this song I found that just seemed absolutely appropriate because it's about the Aleph and Tav. So I'll show you this and look forward to seeing you next Sunday, 10 o'clock. Thanks.
Start, you are the end. In you all things will rise, transcend. The first breath, the final sound. In your truth we're ever found. I'll live and tell the story begun. The one who is the risen Son. To age, your name resounds. Yahuwah Elohim, holy and crowned. Who was, who is, who's yet to come. we're made one. Eternal.